It was July 22, 1991. In a quiet Milwaukee neighborhood, a man named Tracy Edwards ran down the street in handcuffs, terrified, desperate, screaming for help. A police car pulled over. Officers listened as Edwards told them about a man who had invited him to his apartment, a man who had tried to kill him. The officers followed him back to that apartment, apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street. When the door opened, the smell hit them first, thick, rotten, and unmistakable. The man who greeted them looked calm, polite even. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer. Inside, the officers noticed strange things: photographs of men, a Polaroid camera, tools, and a strong odor coming from the refrigerator. One officer opened it and froze. Inside were human heads, carefully stored in plastic bags. That moment marked the end of one of the most horrifying killing sprees in American history, and the beginning of the world's descent into Dahmer's twisted nightmare.
Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer had seemed ordinary to most people. Born in 1960 in Wisconsin, he was quiet, shy, and awkward, the kind of boy who blended into the background. But behind his calm face, something dark had been growing since his teenage years. At 18, Dahmer committed his first murder. His victim was a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. Dahmer bludgeoned him with a dumbbell, dismembered the body, and buried it in the woods behind his house. It was the start of a cycle he couldn't stop, a compulsion that would soon define his existence. After years of drifting through alcohol abuse, failed jobs and short arrests, Dahmer's true horrors began in the late 1980s. He lured men, often young, vulnerable, or marginalized, to his apartment with promises of money, drinks, or photographs. Once inside, he drugged them, strangled them, and performed acts too disturbing to describe in full. But what truly froze the nation was what Dahmer did after death. He kept skulls, hearts, and bones as trophies. He photographed every stage of his crimes. He dissolved bodies in acid. He stored remains in the freezer. Pieces of the people he once spoke to, laughed with, and then destroyed. When detectives searched his small apartment, they found human remains in almost every corner. A total of 11 skulls, 3 severed heads, and 2 complete skeletons. There were jars filled with preserved organs and a 57-gallon drum containing acid and human torsos. On the table, Polaroid photos showing the dismemberment process. The walls were covered with the faces of men, victims whose lives were taken, one by one, in silence. What chilled investigators wasn't only what Dahmer did, but how calmly he talked about it. During questioning, he admitted to 17 murders, describing them with unsettling precision. He said he didn't kill for hate. He killed because he didn't want his victims to leave. He wanted control. He wanted them to stay. Those words made headlines across America. For months, the country couldn't look away. The details were beyond comprehension: necrophilia, cannibalism, and a kind of evil that felt almost clinical. Dahmer's trial began in 1992. He pleaded guilty but insane. The court rejected that argument and sentenced him to 15 consecutive life terms, over 900 years in prison. But even behind bars, Dahmer's story didn't end peacefully. In 1994, he was beaten to death by another inmate, bludgeoned with a metal bar in a prison bathroom. His death sparked one final debate: was it justice, or simply another act of horror?
For many Americans, Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes were not just about murder. They were about the dark corners of the human soul. He wasn't a monster from a story. He was a man, living in an apartment complex surrounded by neighbors who heard nothing, saw nothing, and suspected nothing. It forced people to ask terrifying questions. How well do we really know the people around us? How many horrors hide behind a polite smile or a friendly face? Dahmer's apartment was torn down years later, the entire building demolished, erased from Milwaukee's skyline. But the memory remains, an invisible scar in American history. Because inside that small, ordinary apartment, humanity saw something unforgettable. Evil doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it wears a face you wouldn't look at twice.